Hello, dear students, welcome to our program. Today we're going to discuss the topic alkaloids. The main objectives of today's topic are introduction of alkaloids, general characteristics of alkaloids, classification based on origin of alkaloids, classification based on pharmacological characters, biological activity, pharmacological activity, toxicity of alkaloids, effects of drug and alcohol abuse, and finally production in cell culture. Now let's first move on to introduction. The term alkaloids or alkali-like was first proposed by the pharmacist W. Messner in 1819 for plant origin basic nitrogen containing compounds. The first discovered alkaloid was narcotine, isolated from opium by Derosine in 1803. Ladenburg defined alkaloids as naturally occurring plant compounds having a basic character and containing at least one nitrogen in a heterocyclic ring. They are found in many plant families. Perhaps 20 to 30% of all plant species accumulate alkaloids. They are similar with families such as the Solanaceae and Apocyanaceae, where as many as 60 to 70% of species accumulate alkaloids. Alkaloids are derived from the few common amino acids. Most of them have physiological activity. Majority of them are basic but have non-basic forms also, such as quaternary compounds and N-oxides. Many alkaloids give simple color and precipitation reactions with Charles-Drugendorff reagent that make it relatively easy to determine their presence or absence in the plant material. More than 10,000 alkaloids are known, out of which about 6,000 are named in the NaPrAlert database. Many alkaloids are used in medicine. They sometimes are very expensive. For example, vincristine, which sells for as much as Rs 1 lakh per gram. However, most of the alkaloids are toxic. They often are responsible for the properties of plant poisons. Alkaloids are derived from a few common amino acids. Mostly all have physiological activity. Most are basic but have non-basic forms such as the quaternary compounds and N-oxides. As a group of alkaloids, they can easily be isolated. They are extracted with the lipophilic or non-polar solvents such as chloroform or petroleum ether, the solution portioned with dilute aqueous acid washed with the non-polar solvent. The similarity of the structures of many alkaloids and their ability to attack the neurotransmitters makes them potent nervous system drugs. Among these neurotransmitters are acetylcholine, noradrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. The main characteristics of alkaloids are complex molecular structure and significant pharmacological activity. They are unique molecules of the plant kingdom which has action on animals. Therefore, alkaloids are generally defined as physiologically active basic compounds of plant origin in which at least one nitrogen atom forms part of a cyclic system. In 2008, the Botanic Gardens Conservation International, representing botanic gardens in 120 countries, stated that 400 medicinal plants are at risk of extinction from overcollection and deforestation, threatening the discovery of future cures for diseases. These included yew trees, the bark of which is used for the cancer drug Taxol; Hoodia, the plant from Namibia, source of weight loss drugs; half of magnolias used as Chinese medicine for 5,000 years to fight cancer, dementia and heart diseases, and autumn crocus for gout. The group also found that 5 billion people benefit from traditional plant-based medicine for healthcare. Now let's learn about the characteristics of alkaloids. General characteristics of alkaloids. The general characteristic of alkaloids may be grouped together in two categories. First being physical characteristics and second chemical characteristics. Let's first discuss physical characteristics. Alkaloids and their respective salts exhibit considerable variation in their solubility both in water and organic solvents. This can be attributed from their extremely complex and varied chemical structures. Free alkaloid bases are found to be fairly soluble in organic solvents such as ether, chloroform, hexane, benzene, petroleum, immiscible solvent, lower alcohols, for example methanol and ethanol, but they are either insoluble or very sparingly soluble in water. The alkaloid salts are almost freely soluble in water, relatively less soluble in alcohol, and mostly insoluble or sparingly soluble in organic solvents. For example, atropine sulfate and morphine hydrochloride are much more soluble in water than their corresponding bases, that is, atropine and morphine. Now let's discuss the chemical characteristics of alkaloids. The chemical characteristics of the alkaloids vary with individual compounds. They are classified based on their chemical nature. Nitrogen in the molecule of alkaloids. The number of nitrogen atoms vary from 1 in a molecule, for example cocaine, to even 5 in a molecule, for example ergotamine. It has been observed that these nitrogen atoms are normally present as a part of the heterocyclic ring in the alkaloid molecule, for example quinine, whereas there are certain alkaloids that contain the nitrogen atom in the aliphatic side chain, for example ephedrine, mescaline. Oxygen in the molecule of alkaloid. In addition to the common elements, for example carbon, hydrogen and nitrogen, a variety of alkaloids normally contains oxygen atom, for example pilocarpine. Basicity or alkalinity of alkaloids. In general, the alkaloids are basic in reaction by virtue of the presence of nitrogen atom in the molecule. Hence, they easily get converted to their respective salts with various acids. Amphoteric alkaloids. There are some alkaloids which are amphoteric in nature, that is, they are neither acidic nor basic in character. This is due to the presence of phenolic moiety in the morphine or the presence of carboxylic function in the norcine. Unstable alkaloidal salts. There exist some specific alkaloids that inherently possess weak basic properties and their salts are not so stable, for example piperine, papaverine, norcine, nicotine and caffeine. Neutral or slightly acidic alkaloids. There are a few typical naturally occurring alkaloids that almost behave as either neutral or slightly acidic character, for example ricinin and theophylline. The complete decomposition of alkaloids by strong acids results in the change of color. The chemical change caused by the mineral acids on them may be categorized into 3 different types, namely, first, dehydration. Dehydration of alkaloids give rise to either anhydro or apoalkaloids such as apomorphine obtained from morphine, apoatropine obtained from atropine. Second, demethoxylation. The removal or elimination of the methoxyl groups from the alkaloids by treatment with either a concentrated hydrochloric acid to produce methyl chloride or methyl iodide, which giving rise to the corresponding hydroxy base, for example codeine, quinine, nicotine and papaverine. Third is hydrolysis. A good number of naturally occurring alkaloids are obtained as esters. They easily undergo hydrolysis on being heated with either alkalis or mineral acids, thereby resulting into the formation of the corresponding acids along with the respective alcohols or phenols of the alkaloids. Action of alkalis. The action of alkalis like NaOH and KOH on the alkaloids are found to be varying in nature. First, dilute alkaline solutions of KOH or NaOH normally decompose most alkaloidal salts and finally liberate the free alkaloids. Second, certain alkaloids containing phenolic hydroxyl groups, for example morphine, on being treated with alkaline solutions yield their corresponding soluble sodium or potassium salts. Third, the ester alkaloids usually undergo hydrolysis on being treated with dilute alkalis such as atropine and cocaine. Fourth, racemic isomeride. The action of alkali hydroxides on hyoscyamine in alcohol gives rise to racemic isomeride atropine. Fifth, fusion of alkaloids with dry KOH or NaOH by the application of heat ultimately leads to drastic decomposition of the former, thereby yielding ultimately the simple heterocyclic bases, for instance pyridine, quinoline, pyrrolidine, etc. Sixth, Simple fusion of alkaloids with alkali hydroxides may give rise to distinct and visible color chains. Dear students, now let's move on to the classification of alkaloids based on the origins of alkaloids. Most alkaloids in plants are metabolized from amino acids like ornithine, lysine, nicotinic acid, anthracynolic acid, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. The most common reactions during the biosynthesis are Schiff base formation, Mannich condensations, decarboxylation of amino acids, transamination and conversion of amines to aldehydes by amine oxidase, which leads to the synthesis of some of the alkaloids that we will discuss in detail. Ornithine and lysine derivatives. They are non-protein amino acids. L-ornithine usually constitutes an integral part of the urea cycle in animals, wherein it is eventually produced from L-arginine in a reaction sequence catalyzed by the enzyme arginase. The various alkaloids derived from the ornithine may be categorized into three heads. First, pyrrolidine alkaloids, for example, hygrine, cuscohygrine and stachydrine. Second, tropane alkaloids, for example, atropine, cocaine, cinnamoyl cocaine, agonine and hyoscyamine. Third, pyrrolidazine alkaloids, for example, retronosine and cynosine. Phenylalanine tyrosine. These are alkaloid molecules derived from the phenylalanine and tyrosine. They are classified based on the genus of the plants where they are present. Colchicine and related alkaloids. Colchicine is found in the leaves and seeds of at least 19 species of Colchicum and other 10 related genera. Amaryllidaceae alkaloids. Amaryllidaceae alkaloids includes compounds such as lycorine, norpluine, lycorinene and homylcorine. Mesembryanthemum alkaloids. Alkaloids found in the genera Mesembryanthemum and Cycletium. About 25 alkaloids of this type are known, some of which are hallucinogenic. Cephalotaxis and homoerythrina alkaloids. Cephalotaxis alkaloids have anti-tumor activity. Harringtonine, homoharringtonine, isoharringtonine and deoxyharringtonine have significant anti-tumor activity. They inhibit DNA synthesis and protein synthesis. Alkaloids derived from L-tryptophan are neutral heterocyclic amino acids containing essentially an indole ring system. This serves as a precursor for a wide spectrum of indole alkaloids. They are classified as: first, simple indole alkaloids, serotonin, psilocin and psilocybin. Second, simple beta-carboline alkaloids, for example, harmine, harmaline, harmine and alleganine. Third, terpenoid indole alkaloids, agmelicine, aquamycin, tabersonine, catharinthine. Fourth, quinoline alkaloids, cinchona, cinchonine. Fifth, pyrroloindole alkaloids, for example, physostigmine. Sixth, ergot alkaloids, for example, ergotamine, ergocene, ergocrystine, ergocryptine. Alkaloids derived from a xanthine nucleus, for example, caffeine, theobromine and theophylline. Steroid alkaloids, for example, solanine and caconine. Classification based on the pharmacological characters. Many alkaloids have documented multiple effects on different parts of body. Neurotransmitter receptors, for example, nicotine, cocaine and morphine. Neurotransmitter transport degradation, for example, cocaine. Interfere with cytoskeleton, for example, Taxol. Ion channels, for example, caffeine. Enzyme inhibitors, for example, caffeine and theobromine. Dear students, now let's discuss the biological activity of alkaloids. Medical use of alkaloid containing plants has a long history. The first alkaloids were isolated in the 19th century and applied in clinical practice immediately. The alkaloids exhibit a wide spectrum and complete diversity of complex structures, which ultimately is responsible for their extraordinary broad range of pharmacological activities covering both the cardiovascular and central nervous system. Most alkaloids usually exert certain specific and definite pharmacological action. A small quantity of an alkaloid may bring about a marked and pronounced pharmacological action on various organs and tissues, both of animal and human origin. Now let's discuss the pharmacological activity. The action of alkaloids on various organs helps them to be used in treatment of various disorders. This also leads to the misuse of these molecules as drugs. The illegal market of these molecules is considered to be 3 to 5 times bigger than the legal markets. All the countries in the world are waging their war against the illegal markets. It's considered that this parallel economy helps in various terrorist activities. Now let's move on to the toxicity of alkaloids. The poisonous and therapeutic effects of plants have been known since time immemorial, but the active constituents have been studied for only about 200 years. Toxic effects in general depend on specific dosage, exposure time, and individual characteristics such as sensitivity, site of action, and developmental stage. At times, toxicity effects can be both harmful and beneficial depending on the ecological or pharmacological context. Alkaloids in general have profound toxic effects on the nervous systems of mammals due to interaction with the neuronal tissue. Mammalian nervous systems are served by two general types of neurohormonal agents or neurotransmitters. First, a transmitter that possesses an ammonium ion and facilitates cholinergic transmission, for example, acetylcholine. Second, those transmitters that possess an aryl ethyl amino moiety, that is 13-phenethyl amino moiety, and facilitate androgenic transmission, for example, dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. These neurotransmitters are believed to serve both the central and peripheral nervous systems. Alkaloids possessing either or both the quaternary ammonium ion or a physiologically induced equivalent, that is a protonated secondary or tertiary amine. The action of one or more of these neurotransmitters directly or indirectly exerting a neurological effect and thus toxicity. At a lethal dose, the alkaloids from Gersemium elegans produced violent chronic convulsions that lead to respiratory failure. Toxins are the active poisonous constituents in few plants, for example, Taxus species. It is suggested that their main action is on cardiac myocytes, resulting in the heart failure and death immediately in animal and humans. 8 piperidinic alkaloids have been identified in Conium maculatum. 2 of them, gamma-conicine and conine, are generally the most abundant and they account for most of the plant acute and chronic toxicity. These alkaloids produce a neuromuscular blockage leading to death due to its paralytic effect on the respiratory muscles. The chronic toxicity affects only pregnant animals. The alkaloid affects the development of fetus and the offspring is born with malformations, hence classified as teratogen. Now let's discuss the effect of drugs and alcohol abuse. The immediate adverse effects of drugs and alcohol abuse are manifested in the form of reckless behavior, vandalism, and violence. Excessive doses of drugs may lead to coma and death due to respiratory failure, heart failure, or cerebral hemorrhage. A combination of drugs or their intake along with alcohol generally results in overdosing and even death. The most common warning signs of the drug and alcohol abuse among youth include drop in academic performance, unexplained absence from school or college, lack of interest in personal hygiene, withdrawal, isolation, depression, fatigue, aggressive and rebellious behavior, deteriorating relationships with the family and friends, loss of interest in hobbies, change in sleeping and eating habits, fluctuations in weight, appetite, etc. There may be some far-reaching implications of drug-alcohol abuse. The adverse effects are just not restricted to the person who is using drugs or alcohol. At times, a drug or alcohol addict becomes the cause of mental and financial distress to his/her entire family and friends. Those who take drugs intravenously, direct injection into the vein using a needle and syringe, are much more likely to acquire serious infections like AIDS and hepatitis B. The viruses which are responsible for these diseases are transferred from one person to another by sharing of infected needles and syringes. Both AIDS and hepatitis B infections are chronic infections and ultimately fatal. AIDS can be transmitted to one's life partner through sexual contact, while hepatitis B is transmitted through infected blood. The use of alcohol during adolescence may also have a long-term effects. It could lead to heavy drinking in adulthood. The chronic use of drugs and alcohol damages nervous system and liver, leading to liver cirrhosis. Another misuse of drugs is by certain sportspersons to enhance their performance. Narcotic analgesics, anabolic steroids, diuretics, and certain hormones are abused in sports to increase muscle strength and bulk and to promote aggressiveness, as a result, increase athletic performance. The side effects of the use of anabolic steroids in females include mascularization, that is, features like males, increased aggressiveness, mood swings, depression, abnormal menstrual cycles, excessive hair growth on the face and body, enlargement of clitoris, deepening of voice. In males, it includes acne, increased aggressiveness, mood swings, depression, reduction of the size of the testicles, decreased sperm production, kidney and liver dysfunction, breast enlargement, premature baldness, enlargement of the prostate gland. These effects may be permanent with prolonged use. In the adolescent male or female, severe facial and body acne and premature closure of the growth centers of the long bones may result in stunted growth. Induced vomiting and gastric lavage are protective measures to reduce absorption of the toxic compounds. Dear students, let's finally discuss the production in cell culture of alkaloids. Many useful plants grow in inaccessible parts of the world or where access is limited by the political uncertainties. Some are in short supply and do not lend themselves to farming or are perhaps slow growing, for example, the Pacific yew, Taxus brevifolia. Sometimes the desired alkaloid is present only in trace quantities, for example, vinblastine from Catharanthus roseus. For these reasons, there has been an enormous effort to grow medicinal plants in flasks or fermenters where alkaloid production may be optimized, carried out without seasonal variations and as required. Plants are differentiated into roots, shoots, etc. and within the tissues into xylem, phloem, etc. Under the influence of plant hormones, indole acetic acid, plant cells grow into identical single-cell bumps or callus. Callus can be broken down into a suspension culture when the culture fluid is agitated. Unfortunately, despite much effort, cultures are unable to produce the quantity of alkaloid found in the parent plant. Hairy root cultures are used more in research for biosynthesis of alkaloids. They are produced by exposing sterilized plant pots to strains of the soil microorganism Agrobacterium rhizogenes, which is able to transfer part of its own DNA, which is tDNA, from a plasmid, a circular loop of double-stranded DNA, to the plant's nuclear genome by inserting desirable genes into their plasmids. Agrobacteria are used to transfer new genes to plants. The tDNA carries genes encoding the biosynthesis of plant hormones. For the production, unusual nutritional amino acids are required by the microorganism. When such cells are grown, they continue to produce the alkaloid. Well, that's all we have in today's program. I really hope you would have understood. Thanks a lot.